What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and we are starting off with news from Prime Minister's questions, which was an interesting day because it started off immediately 10-15 minutes before even Prime Minister questions start with breaking news that Tory MP Christian Wakeford defected to Labour. Yes, Tory MP Christian Wakefield has defected to Labour Party and called on Boris Johnson to quit as Prime Minister. Mr. Wakefield took the Boris South seat from Labour at 2019 general election. He was among the MPs to have written a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister, following revelations about lockdown parties in Downing Street. In a letter to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Wakeford told the PM that you and the Conservative Party as a whole have shown themselves incapable of offering the leadership and government this country deserves. He was cheered by Labour MPs as he crossed the floor of the Commons chamber to join his new colleagues on the Labour benches. In his letter, Mr. Wakeford said Labour is ready to provide an alternative government that this country can be proud of and not embarrassed by. The changes he says his constituents need can only be delivered by a Labour government with Keir Starmer, he's added. Welcoming Mr. Wakeford to his party, Sir Keir said, as Christian said, the policies of the Conservative government are doing nothing to help the people of Bury South, and indeed are only making the struggles they faced on a daily basis worse. People across Britain face a cost of living crisis, but this incompetent Tory government is asleep at the wheel, distracted by a chaos of its own making, referring to the Downing Street parties. That was the first bit of news for Prime Minister questions, but it moves on to other stuff, more exciting stuff, sort of. Plan B, all restrictions to end, Boris Johnson announces. So I actually have the clip from this, so we're going to watch the clip of this, of Boris Johnson himself.
This morning, the Cabinet concluded that because of the extraordinary booster campaign, together with the way the public have responded to the Plan B measures, we can return to Plan A in England and allow Plan B regulations to expire. As a result, from the start of Thursday next week, mandatory certification will end. Organisations can, of course, choose to use the NHS COVID pass voluntarily, but we will end the compulsory use of COVID status certification in England. From now on, the government is no longer asking people to work from home. And people should now speak to their employers about arrangements for returning to the office. And having looked at the data carefully, the Cabinet concluded that once regulations lapse, the government will no longer mandate the wearing of face masks anywhere. The government will also ease restrictions further on visits to care homes, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, will set out plans in the coming days. Mr. Speaker, as we return to Plan A, the House will know that some measures still remain, including those on self-isolation. In particular, it is still a legal requirement for those who have tested positive for COVID to self-isolate. On Monday, we reduced the isolation period to 5 full days with 2 negative tests, and there will soon come a time when we can remove the legal requirement to self-isolate altogether, just as we don't place legal obligations on people to isolate if they have flu. As COVID becomes endemic, we will need to replace legal requirements with advice and guidance, urging people with the virus to be careful and considerate of others. The self-isolation regulations expire on the 24th of March, at which point I very much expect not to renew them. Indeed, were the data to allow, I would like to seek a vote in this House to bring that date forwards.
So as you can see, that is big changes for the UK in regards to what is going on in England. Scotland and Wales have their own rules, so I don't know what's going to be happening there. But also with regards to that self-isolation, as you see in there also in the clips, will be ending around March 24th, although it could be brought forward sooner if they agree that it is the right thing to do, but we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, big changes. No more mandates and stuff and lockdowns and rules. It will be interesting to see what happens with the NHS, whether they will still have the requirement of mandatory vaccination to be an NHS staff member, or whether with this they will scrap that. And I don't know how that will go down if they do scrap it, because I feel like there might have been a lot of NHS staff that left, not just over pay stuff, but over that issue as well. So yeah, many staff have moved to the private sector for various reasons. But moving on to another part of the Prime Minister's questions, which was David Davies, ex-cabinet minister, tells Boris Johnson to resign at PM's questions, saying, "In the name of God, go." And I have the clip for that as well, so you guys enjoy watching that, and I will tune in at the end of it.
David Davies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many on these benches, I spent weeks and months defending the Prime Minister against often angry constituents. I reminded them of his success in delivering Brexit and on the vaccine and many other things. But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. "You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go."
And as you can see, that is a pretty damning statement by David Davies. It's very clear that he wants the PM to resign. And we don't know to the extent of how many feel the same way, but we will find out over the next few weeks and see what happens there. But it might be the case that many more Tory MPs leave for other parties, or there might actually be a vote of no confidence. But let's move into some more general news. 3 Pennsylvania officers charged in shooting death of 8-year-old girl at high school football game. So criminal charges have been filed against 3 Pennsylvania police officers in connection with the shooting death of an 8-year-old girl and the wounding of 3 others at a high school football game last year. The girl, Fanta Bellitti, was killed on August 27th when gunfire broke out shortly after the conclusion of a game at Academy Park High School in Sharon Hill, a community of about 5,700 residents near the Philadelphia International Airport. Billitti's sister and 2 others were injured. Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer announced the charges Tuesday against 3 Sharon Hill police officers, Devin Smith, Sean Dolan, and Brian Devaney, in connection with Billitti's death. The officers face a total of 12 criminal counts of manslaughter and reckless endangerment for their actions that night, according to a statement from the district attorney's office. Preliminary findings in the investigation found that return fire from the police officers after a gunfight between 2 teens likely struck and killed Billitti. Prosecutors announced in September, less than a week after the shooting. We have now concluded beyond a reasonable doubt that it was, in fact, shots from the officers that struck and killed Fanta Billitti and injured 3 others. The statement from the district attorney officers read, "A grand jury recommend charges of voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless endangerment, which were all approved by the district attorney's office. The investigators determined that after the gunshots began, 2 were fired in the direction of the officers who were monitoring the crowd exiting the stadium," prosecutors said. The officers then discharged their weapons in the direction of the football field. The officers were placed on paid administrative leave following the shooting. The Sharon Hill Borough Council will vote on whether to fire the officers during a meeting on Thursday, according to a statement from the council. And obviously, this is really, really horrible situation. A really horrible situation. It is going to be difficult for officers going forward. I think what needs to happen right now is a significant change in police training. I say this often that there needs to be a change in police training because honestly, what's the solution, right? Yes, we could prosecute the officers. That's what should happen. But in order to stop this is we need this not to happen in the first place. And the only way you could do that is by having adequate officer training. And I think it's time that change happened. But we'll have to see what happens with that and whether it does happen. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with these officers. Obviously, there needs to be justice done. An 8-year-old girl lost her life and many other people were injured and traumatized by this. But anyways, let's move on to the final story of the day. which is an extreme one. This is precedent. This is precedent, and this is big, especially in the terms of AI driving. Tesla driver charged with vehicular manslaughter over fatal autopilot crash. Misuse of autopilot, which can control steering, speed, and braking, is the subject of investigation by 2 federal agencies. So, California prosecutors have filed 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter against the driver of Tesla on autopilot who ran a red light, slammed into another car, and killed 2 people in 2019. The defendant appears to be the first person to be charged with a felony in the United States for a fatal crash involving a motorist who was using a partially automated driving system. Los Angeles County prosecutors filed the charges in October, but they came to light only last week. The driver, Kevin George Aziz Riyad, 27, was pleaded not guilty. Riyad, a limousine service driver, is free on bail while the case is pending. The misuse of autopilot, which can control steering, speed, and braking, has occurred on numerous occasions and is subject of investigations by 2 federal agencies. The filing of the charges in California crash would serve notice to drivers who use systems like autopilot that they cannot rely them to control vehicles. Now, I will go further than this. I think it's also very important in terms of who bears responsibility, right? And I think this, in some ways, is saying that yes, these vehicles might have these systems in place, but you are still responsible. You still have to pay attention. You still have to be aware, right? Just because you use these automated systems does not make you any less responsible. And that will be a contentious point going forward if we are to get AI driving, right? And that's one of the big issues with it, over legislation of what is going to happen in the future is who is going to bear responsibility at that point. Is it going to be the manufacturers, or is it going to be the people who own the vehicles, or is it going to be the people behind the wheel of the vehicle? And we'll have to see where that goes. Authorities in Arizona filed a charge of negligent homicide in 2020 against the driver Uber had hired to take part in the testing of a fully autonomous vehicle on public roads. The Uber vehicle, an SUV with human backup driver on board, struck and killed a pedestrian. By contrast, autopilot and other driver-assisted systems are widely used on roads across the world. An estimated 765,000 Tesla vehicles are equipped with it in the United States alone. So yeah, they're still talking about self-driving, right, and full systems. And it's that the driver's still going to have to bear responsibility, right? The person behind the wheel who is there is still going to have to bear responsibility for the consequences and actions of this. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think about the Prime Minister's questions about Tory MP who defected to Labour, the easing of restrictions in the UK, which I think a lot of people are going to be happy about, especially in England. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, they have their own protocol, so we'll have to see where that goes. England's easing restrictions, and the NHS will no longer be required to... Well, government agencies will no longer be required to use face masks, and people won't as well. And the COVID pass system and all that stuff won't be applicable in the UK and in England anymore, which is good. It is good. And then also about Davies giving Boris Johnson a right good going. And obviously the last 2 stories were not very happy ones at all. Hopefully justice is done in both cases. The Tesla case is, well, self-auto driving cars, automated systems, AI driving, the whole thing. The legislation for that going forward is going to be interesting to monitor because these things are going to happen more frequently the more the technology is implemented. And I think there needs to be very strict rules on who bears responsibility and the responsibility that owners of these vehicles have, right? And the responsibility that manufacturers have as well. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.